up, Leafs fans? Welcome back to Leafs Digest. One of the biggest comments that we've been getting in the last few videos that we've done is that the Leafs D is not good enough to win them a championship. One of the comments, kind of things that's been going on, especially in the video that I put out about Kyle Dubas in this offseason, rating his offseason, is that we didn't get D. And that was something that a lot of people have had problems with here, is that we didn't go out and acquire defense, kind of blaming the defense of this Toronto Maple Leafs team as a reason why this team hasn't succeeded in the past few years. Now, I wanted to come out here and address this right away. Is this Toronto Maple Leafs team good enough with their defensive core as it is, and this defense as it's built, good enough to win a Stanley Cup? So there's a few things I want to break down, and it's kind of going to relate back to some of the previous Stanley Cup winners, how their defense is being constructed, guys that are on those teams, in order to determine whether or not this Toronto team is good enough, the way their defense is structured, the way this defensive roster is built. Now, one thing I do want to clarify here as well is that when I broke down Kyle Dubas' offseason, I was strictly talking about this previous offseason, anything that's gone down in this past offseason when I was giving it the grade. I understand that there's been holes and things that Kyle Dubas has done wrong along the way, and I'm not giving him a pass for those. I don't think that an A- is sufficient for what he's done throughout his entire tenure as the GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs. I would be a little more harsh on those things, but I was strictly giving it a grade based off of what he had done with the holes that needed to be filled and the cap space he had available in this offseason going into next season. Now, with that out of the way, I do want to break down whether or not this defense is good enough to win a Stanley Cup. And without beating around the bush, my straight up answer is no. Now, do I think that this defense is bad? No, I don't, quite honestly. Last year, I think that this D took a major step in the right direction, with Rasmus Sandin coming up, being able to fill a role. Justin Holl kind of solidifying himself in that fourth D position. I think maybe he's a little bit shooting out of his weight class playing in that 4 spot. I think he could be a guy who'd be better suited for the 6. But him playing there with Jake Muzzin, I think Jake Muzzin is a great anchor for him. He's a guy who gives him a lot of stability, he gives him a lot of structure, and he gives him a lot of consistency, so Hull doesn't have to do too much every time. He also has a veteran guy who's been around the league. He's won Stanley Cups. He's played with great players before to lean on for advice, lean on for kind of motivation, give him some kind of pointers when they come to the bench after every single shift. So I think that that's good. It's a good spot for him. Now, the other big thing that happened last offseason was TJ Brodie being brought into this onto this team, into this core. And I think TJ Brodie was probably one of the best moves Kyle Dubas and this management staff has made in their entire time being here with the Toronto Maple Leafs. TJ Brodie last season, in the beginning, he was a little bit underwhelming, I guess is the right way to say it, because we didn't really know what to expect from a guy like TJ Brodie. In the first little bit, he didn't play as well. He was adjusting to his structure. It was a weird offseason, whatever the excuses you may want to make for him. But he really fell into his role, and we ended up seeing how incredible of a defensive player this guy is. He's a great skater. He's a great puck mover and handler. He can make the great first pass, all the cliche hockey things you want to roll with, but he executed them to a T, and that was the best we could ask for. TJ Brodie wasn't brought here to score 80 points and 20 goals, whatever that you want from him. He was a guy that was brought here to be incredible defensively, play penalty kill when needed, spot in on some second power play unit time whenever that case arose, and he did all of this above and beyond expectations realistically. He wasn't a Norris Trophy candidate by any means, but he was a solid defenseman who is the perfect number 2 option on this defense. The big hole here, and the one main reason I'm going to say this Toronto Maple Leafs team defense is not ready to win a Stanley Cup, is because they don't have a true number 1. Now, you can say whatever you want about Morgan Rielly, and I do think he is a great defenseman or a great player to have on your defense, but I don't think he's a true number 1. And in order to win a Stanley Cup in the NHL, you need a true number 1 defenseman. Now, I've gone through and listed all of the Stanley Cup winners all the way back to 2010, and every single one of these teams has had a true number 1 defenseman, with the exception of the 2016-2017 Pittsburgh Penguins, where Chris Letang didn't play in those playoffs. He wasn't really a part of that Stanley Cup winning team. He was still on the team. He played during the regular season, but he was injured come playoff time. He didn't really play. But with that being said, I think that defense stepped up as committee to fill his role, and the team kind of did it to win for him because he was out. He was a guy they wanted to win for. They knew older guys are going to be moving on from that team. The core wasn't going to last forever, so they had that little extra motivation in mind. That is a little bit of a speculation. You can't say that for certain, but that's really the only exception here of a team that didn't have a true number one defenseman in the playoff time that was going to be able to take over games. So quickly here to go through, like, the last 2 seasons, Tampa Bay Lightning win the Cup. Victor Hedman is far and away one of the best, if not the best, defenseman in the NHL. He is a huge body who is physical. He's a great puck mover. He's got a great shot. He's got very, very good hands, and he can go end-to-end like nobody's business, especially at that size. It's incredibly impressive, and he can just demand control of a game, whether he wants to speed it up, slow it down, he wants to start throwing guys around and smashing guys through the boards. Whatever Victor Hedman wants to do, he is able to do and implement his style of game onto the game and change the course, change the momentum, whatever he wants to do for the Tampa Bay Lightning. He is a game changer. He's a true number one defenseman who can put up points, play incredibly well defensively in his defensive zone. He's very responsible, and he's just a physical presence who's a great leader. Now you go to St. Louis 2019, Alex Pietrangelo. This was a guy who was very, very sought after in free agency. Toronto was obviously trying to make a move to get him. The cap situation wasn't going to end up working out for them. They end up going out and getting TJ Brody. Great secondary, but Alex Pietrangelo would have been that true number one that we've been looking for. Washington 2018, John Carlson. This guy puts up points like nobody's business. That regular season, he had 15 goals, 53 assists for 68 points. He was running the top power play. He was a Norris Trophy candidate. And this was a guy who, yeah, obviously he was putting up points on the power play, but he could do it at 5-on-5 as well. He could demand control just like Victor Hedman could, where he would just say, I'm going to go and score us a goal because we need one right now. Or I'm going to make an incredible defensive play that turns into an offensive play, grabbing a secondary or primary assist that changes momentum, gets the team on the board, and turns things around for them. Then obviously 16-17 and 15-16 Penguins, Chris Letang. 16-17, as I mentioned, is a little bit of an asterisk there because Letang didn't play in the playoffs. But 15-16, Letang, 16 goals, 51 assists, 67 points in that regular season. He was almost point per game in the playoffs from a defenseman. This is another guy who's a world-class defenseman. He's played for Canada on the World Junior stage, in the Olympics, whatever it may be. He is a guy who's a big game player who can impact the game, impose his will on a game to turn things around. Again, another guys who've played in for Canada at the Olympics and won things at the World Juniors, Duncan Keith and Drew Doughty. During Chicago and LA's reign of terror over the NHL, where they won the 3 cups for Chicago and 2 for LA, both of these guys were premier defensemen. They were both guys that you could look at every single night and say, that is a guy that I would want on my team. That is a game changer. That is a guy who dictates the pace of the game with their play. Breaking out pucks, making turnovers, running power plays. All of these guys here that have been listed can and do run their first power play units on their teams. They're all guys who are offensively gifted as well as incredibly defensively minded, defensively responsible defensemen who can control the game not just by scoring points. These are guys who make big plays, blocking passes, blocking shots, making hits, stopping 2-on-1s, back checking, whatever it is. They just make responsible plays, and they make the smart play that positively impacts the team. And then on top of that, these are both guys who have won on the big stage. They both are Olympic champions. They're both World Junior gold medalists. Like, these are guys who know how to win. They know how to play on the big stage, and they love that kind of pressure. The other guy who sticks out here is Boston's 2010-2011 Stanley Cup, which is Zdeno Chara as the true number one. These teams all had definitive true number one defensemen who weren't just true number one in relation to their team. They were true number one amongst the rest of the defensemen in the league. There's very select players that when you look around to every single team, now let's say there's on average 30 teams in the NHL. Every team has 6 defensemen, so you got 30 times 6, and then you're looking at all of those defensemen. Of the 30 teams, how many of those teams realistically, from year to year, it can change year to year who and how many there are, but how many of those teams do you realistically think have a true number one defenseman? I'd say each year it's probably about 5 sometimes pushing it to 7 true number 1 defensemen in the entire NHL. Guys who are far and away the best defenseman in the league. You look at Erik Karlsson, in that year with Ottawa when he put that team through that crazy run where they got all the way to the conference finals, lost in overtime to the Pittsburgh Penguins. He was one of the best, if not the best defenseman, maybe even hockey player in the world at that point in time. Ottawa ends up not being able to do it. Just a whole bunch of other factors, a little bit of bad luck on their end, whatever the case is. But he was a true number 1 defenseman. He was one of those elite defensemen in the NHL. Every single one of these teams who have won, dating all the way back to 2010, have had that guy. Morgan Rielly is not that guy. Some key things that you look at here. In the last year, just the last year, he lost his spot on power play number 1 to Rasmus Sandin, a rookie coming into the league here. Like this guy, he lost his spot to that guy. He was not playing confidently. He was not playing like he had any sort of swagger or anything behind him. And he wasn't putting up points 5-on-5 on that power play. The power play ended up being struggling with him quarterbacking it, and he loses that spot. None of these guys dating back to 2010 really had that happen to them. Now, another thing all of these guys had that Morgan Rielly didn't is strong defensive play. Morgan Rielly is prone to losing guys, being out of position, coughing up pucks in the defensive end. And yes, I understand that guys make mistakes even at the professional level, but he makes them much more frequently than true number 1 defensemen do. Morgan Rielly is also not that capable of taking over a game. Yes, he'll do it once in a blue moon, and he'll have a crazy offensive rush in 3-on-3 overtime where he has all the space and all the time in the world to go coast to coast and take it to the net. But he's not a guy that just regularly is able to demand control of a game, change the pace, change the tempo, change the momentum, whatever it is that's going to turn things around for the Leafs. He's not that guy who's able to do it. The other thing here is that it ties into the power play is Morgan Rielly has struggled offensively in the past few years, whether it may be because of the Babcock era transitioning into Sheldon Keefe. He hasn't been able to get his footing, whatever it is. True number 1 defensemen don't typically seem to have that problem. Even when there is a little bit of a layover period where they need to adjust, they need to figure some things out, different coach, different systems, whatever it is, they do get over that hump and they start to figure it out eventually. They start to get their mojo back. Morgan Rielly has not had that, and this has lasted a few years now, where he has not been at the top of his offensive game. The last thing here that I want to touch on is Morgan Rielly hasn't won anything on the big stage. You look at Hedman, Karlsson, Letang, Keith, Doughty. These guys are all guys who have won Memorial Cups, AHL championships, Olympic golds, World Junior Championships. They all know how to play on the big stage. They've all made it deeper into the playoffs, and I understand that that is a team thing, not a solo thing, but they've all had that kind of experience to get them there. They're all guys that understand that they can't, and they know how to not fold under pressure. Morgan Rielly doesn't seem to have that. You look at the playoff runs that he's had in the past few years, it's not like these are pinned on him. You can't say that this is Morgan Rielly's fault, but he's not a guy who's ever stepped up to the occasion. We looked at and said, wow, he played incredible. Last year, I don't think he played terribly. I don't think he was bad by any means, but he wasn't great. He wasn't even necessarily good. He was just kind of playing. Like, he was there out on the ice, which is kind of good if you want a guy who's going to go unnoticeable, especially on defense. But when you need a true number 1 defenseman, you can't have them all just be unnoticeable. Someone has to step up and fill that role. Morgan Rielly's not that guy. He's not capable of doing that. Morgan Rielly is not a true number 1 defenseman, and that's what this team needs going forward. Now, I don't know what to do with him. I'm going to sit here and tell you very honestly, I don't know what to do with him. It's been something Josh and I have discussed in previous videos. Do you trade him? Do you try to move on from him? Do you let him walk in free agency? Do you re-sign him right now? I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is, because he's going to demand a lot more money. He's playing on a good contract right now, and he's in the final year of his contract. It's unclear as to what you do with him, but what I will say is that he's not the number 1. Maybe you don't have to move on from him, but you have to accept the fact that he's not the true number 1 defenseman. To be honest with you, it's something I've had this conversation before, it's something someone brought up to me, is that he's probably one of the top 3 number 2 defensemen in the world. If he was a solidified number 2 defenseman on any team in the NHL, he would be one of the best 3 number 2 defensemen in the entire world. And I understand that wording is probably a little bit confusing, but he is a premier support defenseman. If you put him with a true number 1 defenseman, and I know this scenario is gone, but if you put him with Seth Jones, Morgan Rielly would be the best the best number 2 defenseman that you could possibly ask for. He's a guy that can go out there and start to rush more and not have to take on too much responsibility, not have to think too much about the game, not have to feel too much pressure. Remember when Dion Phaneuf came here and it was like, man, you're the number 1 guy. He kind of folded under that pressure. Maybe if we brought someone here to take that true number 1 spot away from Morgan Rielly, he would have that alleviation of the pressure and be able to actually play freely, worry-free, and excel in that role as the number 2, and we would start to see how incredible Morgan Rielly actually is and can be. But I don't think he's that true number 1. So to wrap it all up here, I don't think the Leafs defense is good enough. Now, the rest of the D, I think, is very good. I think that the way it's all built is very good. There are some little holes and there are things I've touched on before. I think we should move on from Travis Dermott, upgrade that position. But aside from that, I really see no problems with this D other than the fact that we need that true number 1 defenseman in order to get us over the hump, take us to the next step, take us to the Stanley Cup final if that's what's in our future. And until we do that, I don't see this team going that far. I don't see this team being able to excel because I don't see a scenario where you can just strictly rely on a team defense built around playing by committee. You need one guy, and it's shown in the patterns of the previous teams that have won the Stanley Cup. You need one guy who's a game changer, who can take over a game and win you games, win you playoff series, win you the Stanley Cup. We need a true number 1 defenseman here in Toronto. Leafs fans, this is a little bit worrisome because I don't see a scenario where we get over that hump until we get that guy. That being said, I do like the roster construction. I think there's opportunity for moves to be made as the season progresses, as we head to the trade deadline. And I think that this management staff is under the impression that this is kind of one of their final runs here together as this group, as they're in their roles, as their jobs. I think that if things don't start to work out, these guys will be under the gun and possibly out the door faster than you can say. And they will be very, very inclined to make big, dramatic moves to change the course of this team in order to push them over the hump and go for that Stanley Cup. So, Leafs fans, I understand that it's a little bit scary. I'm a little bit concerned myself until we go out there and get that guy. But I think that this management staff is going to do whatever they can to make that happen, get themselves over this hump, get the guys that they need in order to excel. And as far as that goes, I'm not that concerned. So, Leafs fans, we'll see you soon. Keep believing.